In this video, we're going to look at a magenta scented ink by Atramentis Scented Dianthus. Now, as always, there's timestamps down below so you can skip around, but if you've got the time, I'd appreciate you checking out the entire video. Also, down in the description is a link to the magenta playlist, so if you wanted to see more of them, you can find that there. I'm an ink guy, and let's get into the first writing sample done on 90 GSM Clairfontaine. We get no bleeding, no ghosting. We have no feather, spread, halo sheen, no shading in the writing. The extra fine's a lot lighter than the stub, while the medium's the same tone. The extra fine took 5 seconds to dry and the medium took 8. Scrubby for both gave no color variation. We're not getting it in the writing. In the smear test, there's a maybe you could recover if you smeared while you were writing. To have a range of experience with this ink, all of the writing samples are done with a Jinhao 159 with a 1.1 stub, a Jinhao X450 with a medium, and a Jinhao X750 with an extra fine. Then a Pilot Metropolitan with a medium nib was inked up, used for a day, and used to take the notes for this video. The next writing sample is done on 52 GSM Tomoe River. We have no bleeding, but we do have quite a bit of ghosting that's going on. It is a very thin paper. We have no feather, spread, halo sheen, and no shading, very little tone variation. The extra fine, which is the only one a little bit lighter, is only slightly lighter than the stub and the medium. The extra fine took 21 seconds to dry, while medium took 32. The scrubby for both gave us no color variation. We didn't get it in the writing, and a smear test you could not recover if you smeared while you were writing. I agree with Vita. There's a lot to learn by doing multiple chromatographies. The one on the left is done the way it's supposed to be done. A line of ink is put down, and then it's put into water for 10 to 15 seconds. And what we see is that this is truly a magenta ink that flees away from the water. Now, all the way at the very top, you see these tiny little red spots where I don't actually think that's a red dye. I think that's a remnant that we're seeing affecting the ink that is the stink of this ink. It's the scent. The one on the right is let dry for 10 minutes before it's put into water, and it essentially looks the same, meaning we're not going to expect any kind of resistance from this ink. The next writing sample is done on 80 GSM Rhodia dot pad. We have no bleeding, no ghosting. We get no feather, spread, halo sheen, no shade, and very little tone variation. Again, the extra fine's a little bit lighter than the medium and the stub. The extra fine took 7 seconds to dry, while medium took 12. Scrubby for both give no color variation. There is none to this ink, and the smear test, you have a maybe you could recover. The medium looks like it could. The extra fine does not. So you go with what that means for you. Resistance tests are done to see how this ink could be expected to perform on the page, and more importantly, how hard it may be to clean from your pen. This smear is allowed to dry for 3 days before testing. Looking at the highlighter, I would not use it because it starts to get quite a bit muddy in that yellow, so I wouldn't use it, although all the information is easily readable. Now, water surprisingly is only breaking down the very top layers. You do see where it's breaking some of it down quite a bit more, but it is definitely not removing it from the paper. Pen flush does a little bit more than what water does, and the 1/3 bleach solution is completely removing it, as you would expect. But it only took water to get the ink out of my pen. It took pen flush to get the scent out of my pen. The next writing sample is done on moleskin paper. Lots of bleeding, but none of this touches the page underneath, but all of it causes an extreme amount of ghosting, which means you can't use the back of the page. They both have some feathering. The feathering in the medium is a bit more, making it look entirely blurry. All the feathering in the extra fine's very minor. No spread, no halo, no sheen, no shade, although the extra fine is a tad bit darker than the medium. It took 3 seconds to dry. The scrubby gave no color variation, or was none in a writing, and the smear test you could recover if you smeared while you were writing. For the inks tested, the average viscosity is 2.5, and the realm of normal is 2.1 to 2.9. Atramentis Magenta has a viscosity of 1.47, making this a wet ink. If you're interested in how the viscosity test and all that's done, then down in the description is a link to that video. The next writing sample was done on Mead notebook paper like you used in school. We have a lot of bleeding that's going on. None of it touches the back of the page. All of it stops you from using the back of the page though, or you'll destroy both sets of notes. The medium has a lot more feathering than the extra fine. The extra fine still has feathering. They both have a little bit of spread, but I think the spread is not horrible to deal with that's there. They go about 1 nib size in which you're seeing. So the extra fine's a fine. It's not actually a fine there. No halo sheen, no shade. The extra fine took 2 seconds to dry. Their tone is the same. There's no difference in pen. The scrubby shows no color variation, and we didn't get any. And the smear test, the good news, you could recover if you smeared while you were writing. For the inks tested, the average dry time was 17 seconds, and the realm of normal was 13 to 21 seconds. Atramentis Magenta has an average dry time of 14 seconds, so it's normal. The last writing sample is done on 20-pound copy paper. This is actually a miraculous performance because despite how deep all of this is, and it all looks like it's come completely through, but none of it touched the page underneath. So there's some good news. You just can't you can't use the back of the page at all. A lot of feathering. There's a lot more spread in the medium than there was in the extra fine. There's no halo sheen, no shade. It only took a second to dry for the extra fine. The scrubby gave us no color variation, and there wasn't. It's a very dark here. And the smear test, you can't smear it, so you don't have to worry about it. Instead of finding inks that look like the Atramentis Magenta, I'd prefer to find an ink that complements its color on the page. I decided to go with a blue ink by Herbin, their Bleu Myosotos. Now, if you'd prefer a different complement color, then down in the description are links to those playlists. So what do I think of Atramentis Magenta? I don't mind the smell of inks. Scented inks, though, give me headaches. So much that I've been putting off this review for a long time, and in fact, it was the 15th writing sample that I ever did. If you're smell sensitive, then avoid scented inks. So what nib and pen would give the best writing experience with this ink? I really am not a huge fan. Like, its darkest tones don't call to me in any way, but I do find its lighter tones to be much nicer. I would go with a dry broad or dry medium nib to really get the most pleasant color from this. I hope you got something out of this video, and in the next video, we're going to take a look at Pilot Mixable Black.